Hello, and welcome to the Path of Most Persistence. This is a place where we hear and share tenacious stories of overcoming obstacles with our partners who dare to share a bit of their own personal paths. Dawn James leads Sustainability Strategy and Transformation with Deloitte's Strategy and Analytics practice. As a managing director within energy and technology sectors, Ms. James leverages her subject matter expertise to foster industry alignment and new business development, helping customers leverage solutions in sustainability, climate, and equity to accelerate their sustainability journeys. Dawn leads a wide range of initiatives in energy transition, sustainability, digital cloud solutions, and innovation. Dawn has over 25 years of industry program management experience as a geoscientist and systems leader. She is a certified naturalist formerly serving as Global Director for Industry Strategy, Energy, and Sustainability, and Director for U.S. Sustainability and Environmental Science Strategy at Microsoft. In addition, she served as research hydrologist with the U.S. Department of the Interior. Dawn's expertise not only includes results-driven leadership, market incubation, and ecosystems innovation, but she also articulates value at the convergence of industry and technology. Dawn, thank you so much for being here today. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we first met a few months ago.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm happy to be here.
When I reviewed your content and looking over, doing all my research and study on you, you're so impressive in, it seems, every area of your life. Hopefully you'll be able to tell us a few of those stories, how you've been able to attain such success, if it's been intentional every step of the way, or it's just been by happenstance in some aspects. Before we even get into that, I want to talk about the very beginning of why geoscience. I love that. I love that that's where I believe your degrees were, and where you first had your professional career.
Right. That's correct. Yeah. So I started with geoscience. I want to say that my love for math and science started when I was very young, as I recall what I was like when I was small. And my parents got me into music when I was young. So I played the piano and I played the violin when I was very young. And as a lot of people will tell you, when you play an instrument and read music, it has a lot to do with pattern recognition and math. Mm-hmm. And I think that lend itself to when I started really studying math. I'd say like middle school was when I really felt it, like algebra, that I could see the math. Right? Like I could understand it as soon as someone explained it to me, and it came very naturally to me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you could see it.
I could see it. I could understand. I have two daughters, and my daughters are like that too. They can understand math very fluidly. And when I started to learn more about math being the language of nature, of how we describe nature, it was very natural for me to gravitate towards the science of nature. Mm-hmm. So originally I was a physics major, and that's what I started out in my freshman year as a physics major. But quite candidly, I did not like the labs. I didn't like being inside all the time, and I thought that the basics of physics was very stuffy. So when I took my first geoscience class, it was outdoors, and it was physics outdoors. And so I fell in love.
Okay. So many directions I want to go already. But before we leave you as a child, so when you started identifying those connections and you were really becoming fond of them, I guess falling in love to some degree, was that nurtured? Was that, you say your daughters have those traits. Did your parents, and was that nurtured at home? Was that also something that you were encouraged at school as well?
I would say I wasn't discouraged. I was a very headstrong child, and one of the things that my mom always said was, don't stifle her creativity. That was the line always, because I was always getting into stuff. I was always doing stuff, and I wanted to be all kind of different things and do all kind of different things. I wanted to travel. I had a head full of dreams. And so I think that all I can say is that no one discouraged me. Whatever it was that I dreamed, people said, okay, you can do it, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say that, people, encouraged my love of math. I think that just came naturally to me. But however I wanted to pursue my dreams, my mom just said, don't stifle your creativity. So I just continued to be creative.
Oh my goodness, what a gift. So when your mother made those comments, was she just making them to you, to family members, or did she actively say that to people maybe in your schools or to community members?
She said it to everyone.
Oh.
My brother, when he would be mad that I messed up his stuff, to my dad when I deconstructed something, to the teachers when they said that I was too headstrong about something, or she said it to everyone. So it was always the repeated line that, I don't know. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, but I mean, she felt that I could do no wrong. And that,
I love it.
It was she just encouraged me to be creative, and she never wanted to stifle my dreams, whatever that meant.
Well, so whenever you write your first book, your memoir, it should be, don't stifle her creativity.
That's true. That's a good line.
It's a very good line. I love that so much. And what a gift that you had a mother that did that for you.
Yeah.
It's such a gift.
It is absolutely a gift. Absolutely. I think about it almost every day.
Do you still have your mother?
Oh, yes, I do.
Oh, very
Yes, I do.
nice.
Yeah.
And is she still one of your champions?
Oh, absolutely. My number one fan.
Love it. As it should be.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Absolutely.
I feel as though we're going into your personal life right now, but let's do it.
Sure.
So what else did you learn from your mother?
Well, I learned how to learn from my mother. I learned about putting myself first and self-care.
Mm-hmm.
She taught me to take care of myself, because she had a stressful job. And, I remember how much stress she was under when she was, when she was my age that I am now. I remember her being at the height of her career and how stressful it was, and the things that she had to do to reclaim her time, reclaim her peace. And that taught me a lot. For now that I'm at that stage in my career with children, and I stop, and I cultivate my joy very intentionally. One of the things I ask my girls sometimes, what makes you happy? And it brings a lot of joy to my heart to hear them rattle off a list that makes them happy. All the little things, all the big things. And I consider that a gift for myself, that I can rattle off the things that make me happy, the little things, the big things. And so when I have to complete that stress cycle, I know the things that I need to do, the strategy that I need to go through so that I can reclaim my peace of mind.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
So for self-care, for not only your mother, but for you, what does that look like? I know you take that time, but what does that time look like? Is it purposeful meditation? Is it taking a walk? Is it exercise? Is it prayer? What is it for you?
It's all of the above. I have a number of tools in my toolkit, and depending on the time that I have or the time that I carve out, I do it all. So I've been taught to meditate since I was young. I'm from California. I don't know if that means anything, but I've been taught yoga and meditation from a very young age. I never used it as an exercise, though. It was always something I thought that you did when you didn't have anything else to do. And so when I got to a certain point in my career where the stress was affecting my body, affecting my health, then that's when I started really falling into meditation as an exercise to reach that level of calm, that level of peace, and then also to be able to get my mind to think more clearly about all the things that I have to hold on to, all of the threads that I'm holding on to. So that has been an extremely powerful tool. Also exercise. I do yoga every single solitary morning. And then obviously I go to the gym, I do the walks. Sometimes if I don't have time, it's just I go out in the backyard, put the sun on my face and walk around in circles. I make sure I get my sleep. I like the long hot baths, and one of my pandemic purchases is a jade mask. And the coolness on my eyes, and it doesn't have to be, a 30-minute. It can be, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, where I just take 5 breaths with the mask on and then, okay, I'm ready for the next thing,
You sharing that, I appreciate so much. I think that our audience benefits from that. I think we all benefit from, against not only someone of your stature, but your success, but for women to talk about that openly. I think our society seems less judgmental about self-care in this last decade or so, especially after COVID.
It didn't used to be that way.
No.
It didn't used to be that way. And it's interesting because when I got my first 9-to-5 job, I remember, I don't know, it was right out of college, and I did temp work was the first thing that I did. And that was the first time that I, was up at 7, 8-hour day, and I don't drink coffee. Yes. So it was physically difficult for me to stay awake and alert and focused for that entire period of time. So that was when I first started. And this can be a little controversial. I know some people don't like the sound of this, but I think it's come full circle now. But I started micronapping. And so I didn't sleep for 3 hours, but I would sleep about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. At lunchtime. So I'd have a quick lunch for 5 minutes, and then I'd sleep for 10 minutes, and then I'd get up and do a couple breaths, walk around the car, and then go back. And that's how I would get through my day.
Wow.
And so I still do that to this day because I still don't drink coffee.
Yes.
And so it's difficult for me to have now, it's not 8-hour days, it's 10-hour days, 15-hour days. Yes. And I am able to perform at that level with clarity because I sleep, I meditate, and I micronap. Right. And I get out and I exercise, I get the sun, I do all of the things. And, a 10-minute nap completely refreshes me. It works.
And it's beautiful because those things may or may not work for other people because everybody has their own chemistry, their own personality, their own life demands. But I find that intriguing that you know that about yourself, that you identified what works for you and you've been consistent with that.
Yeah. I think that that part of the equation is part and parcel to that long list of, accolades that you were reading about.
Yes.
That doesn't happen without me being able to take care of my body.
So true. Thank you for sharing that with me and the audience because, again, there has to be a balance somewhere in our lives. We all go through the hills and valleys of life.
Absolutely.
But taking that time to care for yourself. And also, to me, Dawn, part of that self-care is a time for introspection.
Right.
Really identify, are you the person finding your center, ensuring you have a core, number one, you have a center.
Yes.
And is it the center that is intentional? Is that who you want to be? Is that who you need to be? Because again, going through life, we change. The demands change. Our situations, circumstances change. But so we adjust. So how have you adjusted over the years? You mentioned your daughters, having children, managing your life, all the demands, your fantastic career. How do you adjust?
Well, I think that, one, I accept change. I've always accepted change. I think that I'm not the same person I was last week. I'm not the same person I was a month ago, a year ago, and I accept that. And I encourage that about myself. I think that I should change. If I'm presented with new information, then I should change my opinion, right? And I think that because I grew up as a scientist, I'm an information hound. I love information. I love different ways of gaining information, which is part of the reason why I meditate, because then I can absorb more information. And because of that, I'm presented with new variables all the time.
Yes.
And now you're right. There is a center. There is a core. There's a piece inside of me that is consistent, right? But those things are things like the things that bring me peace, the things that bring me a sense of freedom. Yes. Those are the things that I've always strived for. And then there's the piece of me that I've had to rein in over the years, but I am a consummate dreamer. I daydream all the time. And I think that helps me, one, to be very unique in the space where I, spend time and work. But then it also helps me to be very in touch with what makes me happy.
That is beautiful. And it allows for creativity. It feeds the opportunity to create. I'm so glad you mentioned that comment about change, because I was recently talking to a friend of mine that mentioned that someone had made the comment that, oh, you've changed. And it was an intention. I think that comment was meant to hurt that person. But to me, that's a beautiful sign for in most situations, especially I think for this individual, that if that person truly changed, it's only been for the better, because we evolve, hopefully in circumstances and in situations. So
I think it's hard to stay the same. I think that you have to work very, very hard to be exactly the same, right? Imagine how hard it would be to wear the same clothes every day.
I can't.
Right? Like, I mean, you have to change. You have to work really, really hard to not evolve, because it's our nature to change and evolve, right?
And it's part, not only is it that's such an excellent point, Dawn, but it's also killing off the possibilities of who you were meant to be and what your essence is trying to be, almost, just to work so hard.
Yeah. And, I work very, very hard.
Yes.
I'm a very, very hard worker, but I appreciate ease and I appreciate alignment. And when you resist change, you resist alignment and you resist that sense of ease. One of the things that I say all the time is that peace of mind is the new success. That's the new measure. That's the way I measure my success.
That's perfectly put.
Yeah.
You have so many quotes already that we're just going to use. Everything you've said is just not only so valuable, but so eloquent. And thank you for that. I'm enjoying this so much already. You talk about working hard. So let's talk about that.
Sure.
So you identified yourself as a young person, loving music, loving math, loving science. So were you consistent in that in your educational career? And as you went through those, how did you navigate into your personal and professional career?
Well, it wasn't, easy, because I think that, one, there was a certain innate natural ability that I had towards math. However, hopefully, many people can resonate with the fact that you hit a wall. I hit a wall when I got to college. It wasn't easy anymore. I didn't just know it. I had to study my butt off. I had to ask for help, and sometimes I didn't do well. I was used to just thinking about it and getting A's. That didn't happen in college. I was learning things that I had never even conceived of. I had never even knew existed. And then I had to learn it so quickly. And so it wasn't easy those first 2 years. It was really hard. And I fell down. I, was depressed. And it took a lot to come out of that. It's one of those things that when you fall in a hole and then you learn to climb out of it, one, you learn to not fall again, or you learn how to get up, right? And so that's what I learned. I learned how to fall and get up.
But what did that look like? Okay, I can see, I'm very visual. I see you going through that. But what did it take? What did the getting up look like for you?
Well, it looked like assessing all of my resources around me, right? And that's something that was a skill set that I use to this day.
Yes.
Whenever I feel stuck in a box, what is it that is actually at my fingertips? Is there someone that I can ask? Do I need to pivot? Is there, like, what is it that I can access? And sometimes I've been at different points in my career where I do that and it doesn't work. I try this, it doesn't work. I try this, it doesn't work. But then that's where I think to the point of this podcast, where that persistence comes in. Exactly. And that's where that core, that little girl that believes that in her dreams, right? And believes that no matter what happens, I'm going to make it. I'm going to live and I'm going to make it, right? Like when you're in that mindset, in that depth, you're like, okay, well, let me try this. It doesn't work. Okay. And every single time, eventually something that I tried worked.
Well, okay. So let's talk about that little girl. So that's a little fighter girl. She's a tough girl. She's persistent. But even those little girls, that the essence of who you are, sometimes she gets the wind kicked out of her,
right?
I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
So how do you energize that little girl?
That's that self-care. That's the pieces where you dig deep. I was also an athlete, right? And so that's where you start digging deep, and you look at your family, you look at the affirmations, I do the whole thing. Like sometimes you got to pull it all out of your toolbox, sometimes it's, taking a vacation, sometimes, calling that friend, I've gone through things recently and, years ago, and I have those friends. I need you to hold space for me. They call me immediately, right? And process, right? Dump, vent. Sometimes one of the hardest things for me, and I think the first time I felt this was, like I mentioned, I was an athlete in high school, college, and the first time I lost a race, the first time I didn't get chosen for first chair on the orchestra, oh my God, rejection. That was a hard lesson for me, how to handle rejection.
We're going to talk about rejection. We have to, because we must. So did you figure out rejection, how to manage rejection there at that time? So we're good?
It took me some time, and I still have to fall back on those lessons. For me, what helped me to handle rejection was to let go of the competition, let go of comparing myself to others, and to run my own race. And to look at everything that happens as a lesson, readjust how I see it. Rejection is really just an opportunity to redirect yourself. And it's true. Every time, and I can say this unequivocally, every time that I was rejected, the lesson that I learned from that has carried with me and made me stronger. And eventually where I ended up was better than that place that I thought I wanted to be.
And that is part of releasing yourself.
You have to let it go.
You let it go.
I mean, you have to go through the process. Sometimes you have to go through what feels like a grief process. You have to grieve the dream that you thought it was going to be. And you have to, feel it, let those emotions come through you, so that you can move past it. You have to go through that grief process. But then, one of the things I say to myself is, girl, get up. Get up. And you put that foot right in front of the other. You do what you need to do. And then eventually,
She got up and she's
She
moving
got
along.
up and she did, you know, and then it becomes a story.
Mm. So with that, we're eventually going to get to your current position. We're going to get there. But with some of those getting ups, so to speak, what have been some of your greatest accomplishments after a crawl up, a get up?
Oh, there's been so many. I think one of them that I think about that was a big pivot in my life. So when you were reading some of the accomplishments of my career, you talked about being a hydrologist for the USGS and the Department of Interior, how I got that job. Right. So I was working in geotechnical engineering after my undergraduate degree. And it was essentially construction. It was the AEC sector, the architecture, engineering, construction sector. And it was dirty work. It was hard work. It was dangerous work.
When you say dirty work, just for the audience,
I worked on a
physical.
Yeah, it was physical. It was with
And it
my
was
hands.
actual.
Yeah, I was working
dirty.
on a construction site with contractors, with earth movers. I was building different hillside grading activities in Southern California, so hillside mitigation. And so I was an on-site geologist. I was the only woman, literally the only woman color for miles around. I got misgendered a lot when I would go to lunch and things like that. And I was in the trailer one time, and I was kind of depressed. You know, this was hard work, and I didn't know if this was something that I could do for the rest of my career. And I was in graduate school. I was taking graduate school classes at night and working construction during the day. And I was in the trailer, and the job site was in Malibu, and it was a clear day. And I looked out the window, and I could see Catalina Island. And I had gone there to camp when I was a kid. And this idea came in my head about teaching geology on the island. So I called them, literally looked them up and called them and said, I'm a geoscience graduate student, and I have an idea about running geology hikes on the island. Is there a way that I can volunteer and do that? And they said, yeah, come out here. You have to go through our naturalist training program. That's how I became a certified naturalist. And so I can tell you all kind of facts about all the Channel Islands. And so they took me through all the naturalist training program and taught me the history. So I became kind of like because this is the Catalina Island Conservancy. So I became a docent there. I would take the ferry across. I went about 2 or 3 times a month, and I ran a geology hike. They advertised it in their little newsletter, and I took samples from the rocks along the trail and went to my school and made thin sections and photomicrographs, blew them up, laminated them, and then took people on a journey of the history of the island, the geology, and the formation of those Channel Islands off the coast. And then I ended with why geoscience is important to infrastructure in our civilization and how it works. And that's why I'm also a very big proponent of infrastructure and decarbonizing that sector. And so at the end of one of those hikes, and you can tell I'm very passionate about these kind of things. And so I've always been that way. So I was into it, and I'm like, got all my hand samples and photomicrographs and talking about the rocks, and I'm like into it, right? And it was about a 2-hour hike. I did it all summer, several months. I would camp overnight, and I would do it too. So I camped on the beach while I was there. There were some other scientists that were young like me, and we would camp out there on the beach, and then I'd run the hikes on Saturday and Sunday. Anyways, at the end of one of the hikes, this gentleman, he's like, Dawn, that was one of the most amazing presentations and hikes that I've ever been on. Whatever you do, you're going to be extremely successful. Here's my card. If I can do anything to help you, let me know. He was the chief geoscientist of the USGS for California.
Goodness. You never know.
And I asked him for a job, and he got me an interview, and that's how I became working for the Water Resources Division as a research scientist.
That's a beautiful example of something we talk to students about all the time. You never know who's watching. You never know who's listening to you. We are always making an impression constantly, wherever we are, whatever we do. And it seemed as though you have a keen sense of being aware of opportunity around you, just being sensitive to taking advantage of almost like the epiphany you had, just that, you acted on a notion that you had and you acted on that. That in itself is such a strong characteristic of someone, especially someone that obviously has accomplished so much. But as you were speaking, I'm so curious. I have a friend that is a certified naturalist as well, and I tease her that, she's #goals for me because someday. But what has nature taught you?
Observation and definitely the power of perspective. I feel like, especially when you start learning the science of nature,
Yes,
it is an art and a science, and you start really diving into the patterns of nature to understand the micro and the macro, and you start really diving into the interconnectedness of everything. Not only do you see the metaphor and the parallels in your own life and your own body, because we are of nature, but then it radiates out into everything. I know a lot of people ask me, how did I go from geoscience into tech, into consulting and strategy? And the thing that I say all the time is that I am very good at recognizing patterns. And that started from observing nature. I mean, that's why I consider myself a systems leader.
Yes.
Because that's what this is. It's understanding systems. It's being able to hold many variables and recognizing the patterns in those variables and the interconnectedness. And it sounds esoteric, but when you start breaking down the science of it, that's literally what it is that we're doing.
That's exactly the truth.
And so if you apply an artistic eye to the science, you end up being able to predict things.
Because it follows a pattern.
Right.
There's a pattern. It always goes back to the pattern.
But you're not really predicting, right? What you're doing is you're understanding the present in a way that you understand what's feeding the different pieces. Like, so for instance, I remember that I was working with this big Fortune 500 company, and, I gave my presentation, to talk about sustainability, ESG, energy transition. I do the whole thing, and I get to the end of it, and the guy's very, very impressed. He's one of the presidents, and he's just like, first of all, Dawn, I want to offer you a job. I'm like, I don't have a job. And then he goes, tell me how to future-proof my business. And the way I think and the way I answered that was that the future is happening now unequally in many different places in the present.
Yes.
It's about what fuels those different unequal futures that leads one step to the next and gives life to the thing that is going to end up being next. And so it's understanding the landscape that helps you understand what to do next. And so that is information. It's understanding variables and then being able to connect patterns, which is systems leadership.
So, with that being said, let's transition into your current position. What you do, what is it that you do, how is it that you do it, and how, because it's a recent change.
Yeah, it's very new. So I'm just a month in. So.
Yes. And how have you adjusted?
Yeah. So I spent the last little over 4 years at Microsoft, And that was a big change for me. So I was an individual contributor for the majority of my career as a geoscientist. And when I made the pivot into to Microsoft, I leveraged the industry expertise that I had from being an individual contributor and applied it to digital transformation. So the core of what Microsoft does from an IT and cloud services company. But being able to put the lens of industry on top of that. And in that position was the first time in my career that I could bring all of my experience to bear, where my work in engineering was relevant, my work in environmental science was relevant, my work as a geoscientist was relevant, and I could bring all of that to bear and learn something new, right? So I had to teach myself business management, I had to teach myself digital transformation, I had to teach myself that entire portfolio, and then how to articulate that in a way that was driving impact for our customers.
Yes.
So that's where I'm at today with Deloitte. That this type of work, that's where it started, was at Microsoft. So I segued that industry expertise into strategy. And so that's where, again, I taught myself. And I took classes. So I haven't finished, but I'm getting a certification from Stanford Graduate School and in their business graduate school. And so for me, that taught me the nomenclature. You know, I'm a scientist, so we're all about nomenclature.
Yes.
You know, it's like it's just another language, right?
Yes.
And so I absorbed it, you know. So once you're able to absorb the nomenclature and then understand the nature, again, the nature of organizations, because it's really just, human beings that create it. So there's a psychology for organizations, and you combine those things and you understand sales and business development, you understand the markets and that sort of thing. And then you start to be able to develop that strategy for what comes next and how you leverage digital acceleration, maturity, data, AI, ML, all of the bells and whistles, all of the things, right? You learn how to leverage that in a way to, as that one president said, future-proof the business.
Yes.
So that's what I did at Microsoft. And for me, that next step was because I wanted to be able to double down on what I do well. And that's always been, this nexus for me. Yes. And when I talk about the peace of mind and the being able to do things that are in alignment, that is doing what I like to do, and doing what I do well, right? So I do that very well. And I like to talk about these type of things. I like to talk about the interconnectedness. I like to be able to bring that digital aspect into how we're going to change our ways.
Okay.
Right?
That's the hot spot right there.
That's the heart. How are we going to survive, mitigate, or adapt to change? Because our climate is changing.
Like it or not.
Like it or not. So how are we going to decarbonize, mitigate, adapt? And there's a full gamut. There's engineering solutions, there's retail solutions, there's a full gamut of things, variables, information, things that we have at our fingertips. How are we going to hone all of this into a dream, a vision, clarity, methodology, strategy, and implementation and deployment? How are we going to do that? How are we going to infuse innovation into the process? And how are we going to do it different? Because what got us here is not going to save us moving forward. So how are we going to do it in an equitable way?
Yes.
How are we going to do that with justice at the center? And how are we going to do it in a way that is fast and efficient and takes into account the global human condition?
So then, Dawn, how are we going to do it?
We do it together.
We do it together. And it does take lots of partnerships.
Yes.
It takes lots of collaboration.
Absolutely. And so that very lofty purpose
Yes.
is what drives me. Because one, what I do well is helping companies figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And having the resources, and the other thing that I do well is synthesize information.
Mm-hmm.
So a company like Deloitte, they are professional purveyors of information. And so I, the first month that I've, since I've been there, I've just really enjoyed myself and trying to understand, the pieces that I feel are where we need to cultivate this information. I'm just absorbing it at this point. I think that when we start talking about shifting and changing economic structures, there's a lot of information on that. How do we fund the right kind of innovation to spur change? That's really a big part of what I'm studying and learning right now. And then also the different types of technologies that are coming to fruition. So I sit on the board of directors for Greentown Labs, which is one of the largest clean tech incubators in the United States. And looking at that innovation sector, looking at the startup space, how do we bring these new innovations and technologies up to bear so that corporations and businesses can take advantage of leveraging these innovations and being able to scope and scale them, because that's one of the things that we need. Not just having a good idea is enough.
Yes.
We need everybody to be able to leverage that good idea.
That's right, and be in agreement that is a good idea.
Well, I think it's all hands on deck at this
Yes.
point, right? I don't think that we throw away ideas at this point. I think that, like I said, the future is happening unequally all over the place.
True.
So I think that in a lot of ways, the market will weed out what works and what doesn't work, but we bring it all up to the surface. One thing that was very exciting to me are the number of scientists that Deloitte employs, and the number of creative thinkers. I've always been fascinated by futurists. And so there's several chief futurists that work at Deloitte. And I was laughing when I finally got to have a meeting with one, because it's like, I've been cyber stalking you for about a year and a half.
Yes.
So I absolutely love having access to people's minds that are brilliant. There's a lot of brilliant minds at Deloitte, and I love being in the same company as them.
So for the audience, what is a futurist? How would you describe that colleague or others that use that as a title or a description of what they do, how they do?
Well, I think they would have to describe it for you. I think what I think a futurist is a purveyor of information, and someone that creatively understands how things are moving, whether they're focused on technology and innovation, or they're focused on a sector. They're looking at all of the different variables, and they are, like I said, a purveyor of information. They're a listener.
Finding patterns.
Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons why I'm so excited about meeting them, because I see a kindred spirit.
When you said that, I thought, I think Dawn's a futurist.
I
don't know if you've identified yourself as that, but it sounds as though you're on your way. When you look toward the future and you just have your daily conversations with your children, with colleagues, at work or outside of work, neighbors, friends, family members, what can just ordinary people, so to speak, what can we all do to be better at mitigation? And how can we all find the little, perhaps, naturalist inside of us? Or nurture that naturalist inside of us?
Well, I think that we look around in our current situation. I think that one of the things when I talk to mentees and, people are like, oh, you do so much. I don't think it's about doing everything. I think that it's about making the small changes. the changes in maybe how you dispose of your waste, the changes in your eating, the choices that you make in your consumerism,
Yes.
who you vote for, those type of changes are going to be the incremental changes that if people do them in mass will make the big shifts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being a small part of a big puzzle can't be, it can't be understated,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that understanding that you matter, is really important. And so I think that nurturing the naturalist inside of us all, I think it's just that that curiosity, that confident curiosity. And I think that that's what it is for me, because I think we all have questions, but maybe we're not confident to explore them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the last thing I'd say is exercising our empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a huge reader. I don't know if you could tell, but I am a voracious reader. And one thing I find is that reading fiction, reading the fiction of other cultures,
Mm-hmm.
helps to grow your empathy. So I would encourage people to grow their empathy.
What does that look like to grow your empathy?
Well, to expand your horizons, to read stories that are not your own, so that like when you read stories that are not your own, and you're faced with either a conversation with somebody
Mm-hmm.
that you don't, that maybe you don't share a cultural background, or even presented with a problem, or a candidate that you're looking to hire, whatever it may be, when you're presented with something that is different from what you're used to, if you have something that you can find that is common, then that helps you to empathize with that person.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be exactly the same, but if you can empathize with someone because they're a mother, or you can empathize with someone because, they like to swim, that actually changes your mindset for how you interact with them. And that also changes your mindset for things like, the things that comes to my mind is when we start talking about environmental justice, and we start
Mm-hmm.
looking at, a lot of the systemic issues that go
Mm-hmm.
along with environmental justice. A lot of that could have been weeded out with simple empathy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. When you think of your daughters, do you, I know, I must know that you are mindful in how you interact with them all the time. I know that to be true without you even saying that. But do you intentionally model certain characteristics, perhaps persistence, perhaps things that you may not be feeling or thinking at the time, but because you know they need to see it, they need to feel it? And in addition to that, what do you want for your daughters?
I'll take it in reverse. I think,
Okay.
What I want for my daughters is for them to be happy. That's simple.
Is it simple?
Well, I think that, happiness is I think it's art and a science too. I think that there's a methodology to happiness.
Yes.
There's a happiness quotient. There's a science of happiness. And I
Yes.
think that if you do the steps, you can cultivate happiness, right? And so I think that also with kids, they don't necessarily do as you say, they do as you do. My kids are tired of me lecturing. That's what my oldest daughter says. She's tired. She's heard all of my lectures before because I practice on them all the time. And so it's not about my words anymore. It's about how I show them and how I live my life to teach them the tools of cultivating happiness. I think that was a big pivot for me in my life because, again, I'm always changing. And it wasn't enough for me to say, I want you to be happy, go be happy. It was, I need to be happy.
Yes.
I need to crack the nut on how to cultivate my own happiness so that I can model it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the best gift that I can give them. I don't care what they want to do in life or how they, decide to become their own human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can have those tools in
Mm-hmm.
your tool belt, because life isn't easy. As much as I want to, I make the joke, I want to carry them in my womb till they're 35 years old.
Yes.
Like I just want to
Yes.
protect them.
Yes.
I can't.
Yes.
So the next best thing is to teach them to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. I want to spend more time here. When we talk about happiness, you want happiness for your daughters. What is happiness? Is it having the things you want? Is it just having a smile on your face? What is happiness, Dawn?
I think it's different for everybody. I think that, I can tell you what's happiness for me. My favorite food is mango. I love the sunshine on my face. I go into another world when I swim. A hug from my daughters is complete joy for me. Waking up from a deep sleep makes me happy. A long bath makes me, the list can go on, right? I think that when my dad, he used to ask me, what is it that you want? Like, what is it that, you want to be and what you want? And the thing of it is that I learned is that I don't dream of labor. I don't dream of working. And when he used to ask me that, I would say, sitting on the beach with a Mai Tai with my feet in the water. Mm-hmm. And he would say, that's not a job. And that was the only thing that would come into my brain.
Yes.
And it took me a little while to say to myself that sitting on the beach in Mai Tai with a Mai Tai is actually financial freedom.
Yes.
It's peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ease.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I cultivate those things in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was describing for you.
It's wonderful. And I think it sounds as though happiness is knowing how to identify what brings you joy.
Right.
Because you clearly know what brings you joy. And leaning on that brings you happiness. Yeah. That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. One more thing before we leave. You also mentioned that you want your daughters to be able to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, what is that? Now, I'm a mother, and I know what that means for me, but what does that mean for you and your daughters in wanting them to be able to protect themselves?
It's going to make me cry because
it's okay.
It's like all the slings and arrows, right? There's all the pitfalls in life, and once upon a time, I was, I guess maybe I'm still a daredevil, but I was a huge daredevil. Ooh, I don't know how my mom did it. I really don't. I definitely appreciate my mom so much more than I'm
She wasn't going to stifle you.
She didn't, though, but gosh, dog it, I don't know how she did it. I really don't know. I wanted to travel. I went backpacking by myself in Fiji. I went to Europe when I was 14. I wanted to travel and I wanted to just be on the go and do all of these things. And there were pitfalls. There were dangers. There were things that, I'm lucky to be alive, and so there's a part of me that on this end of the spectrum, I want to save them from all the heartache and, all of that. But at the end of the day, that's not going to protect them, right? It will actually stifle them. So experience, being able to have that confidence and experience and that know-how. I taught my oldest daughter to read when she was 3, and I curate book lists for her. Mm-hmm. She got that from her mom. She likes to read, so I curate book lists for her. My youngest daughter, she is a consummate innovator, And so I curate treasure hunts for her, so that she can learn to create and to innovate in a responsible way, And then I encourage them to get out. I encourage them to make friends and to experience adults in a safe way, so that they can learn to find their voice. I think that's really important, to advocate for themselves. I had them memorize my phone number by the time they could talk.
Yes.
These kind of things, And I talk to them, whether they're listening to me or not. I tell them about the world and what they're going to encounter and how I've navigated it. I think that one of the biggest gifts, another gift that my mom gave me was she unabashedly told me about her life and the mistakes that she made. And so when I encountered those things, even though I thought I wasn't listening, when I encountered those things, I was like, oh, my mom said not to do that, And so when I was backpacking on an island somewhere, I had those lessons in my head. And those are the things that I think probably saved me.
You also mentioned that you were lucky.
Yes.
You were lucky.
I
So
consider
do you,
myself a lucky person.
okay, so do you believe in luck?
I think that, people say that luck is where experience meets opportunity.
Yes.
I also think that you can cultivate luck. I think that, like I said, it takes a lot of work to stay the same.
Yes.
It also decreases your potential for things to happen that could be considered luck, right? So one of the things that I do is if I'm going into like a conference or a space that I've never been in and there's going to be a lot of people, I sit in the car for a second, I close my eyes and I think of a color. When I walk into that space, anyone wearing that color, I go and talk to them.
Interesting.
And I can tell you that has helped me to have conversations, experiences, things that never necessarily would have come to me that may be considered lucky. I've put myself in situations completely outside of my comfort zone. I've put myself in situations that I have no idea how to do it. Going to a place like Microsoft as a geoscientist, I didn't know.
Yes.
Right? And I figured it out.
Nice.
And that has, I don't know if you would consider it lucky per se, but it increased that surface area, right, for things to be able to gravitate towards me.
Cultivation. Love it. So as we begin to wrap up our conversation, which I'd love to continue on, what have we not talked about? What needs to be said before we close out?
Well, I think that one of the things that I think is understated sometimes is bravery, and courage. I think that when I just spoke about doing things that are completely outside of your comfort zone, it takes bravery to do that kind of thing. And jumping and not knowing where you're going to land, it takes courage. And I think that everybody has that inside of them. And, it takes, something in your gut to be like, it's okay if it doesn't work out, but what if it does work out?
What if it does?
Yeah.
What a wonderful way to end our conversation. What if it does?
Yeah.
So, Dawn, thank you so much for visiting with me today. It was not only inspirational, but aspirational. And what if it does? Love that. So to our audience, I hope you've had the opportunity to listen to this conversation and all of our other conversations on all of our platforms. And for me, I'm going to encourage us all to, number one, accept change. And number two, don't stifle your creativity or anyone around you. Thank you and have a lovely day.